Hello, lovely listeners. Welcome back to The Voice Within. How are you feeling? How are your days going by? It's always good to check in with yourself to see how are you every day. We often tend to ask everybody around us how they feel, but we kind of forgot to ask ourselves how are we and what do we need in every day. So even you cannot reply directly on this question, I would like to encourage you to check in a little bit with yourself to see how are you feeling in your body, in your mind. Is there something that you need right now that you are kind of neglecting and pushing on the side because of all of obligations you have in your life? And to think about it on ways how you could give yourself exactly that what you need. Before I get into the topic of today's podcast episode, I would like to draw your attention on possible noise in the background of my recording. We have a lot of construction works happening around us. For those of you who live in Bahrain, we live in DR and it's almost impossible to get isolated and record podcast in the peace. I often try to record it at night when there is way less noise, but sometimes I get tired at night, especially now with Ramadan, and I go earlier to bed. So I was kind of forced today to record this podcast during the day and just accept the noise in the background and deal with it. Although I will try to edit it during the editing process as much as I can, but if you hear it in the background, just bear with me. This is the best I can do right now. So today we're going to talk about communication in relationship. I think this is very, very powerful topic because the communication in every relationship is the core of the relationship. Because of good communication, we establish deeper understanding, we resolve the issues. Because of bad communication, we get into the conflicts, we get into the fights. And if we don't know how to communicate properly in our relationship, it can lead to a lot of problems. So I have decided today to talk a little bit deeper about this topic, to give you my point on this, to share with you some of my experiences and the things that I am using in my relationship when we talk about communication and how does it help me to establish better understanding and better communication with my partner. In every relationship, whatever is romantic or family relationship or professional relationship, communication is the cornerstone. But often than not, we struggle with the way we communicate effectively, with the way we are trying to pass our thoughts to another person, which often leads us to a lot of misunderstanding, to a lot of unresolved conflicts, and on the end, kind of lack of intimacy. I was investigating the way I communicate in my relationship for a very long time. I was trying to improve it, to get it to the higher level of understanding. And often I would be caught into thoughts of why would I do it? Why he doesn't do it? Why he doesn't be the first one? But I would like to highlight right now the fact that if we're talking about relationship, about marriage, we both have a responsibility to make it better, to make communication better. And if we're moving from the place of you start, I'm not going to start it, we are immediately putting our relationship from the beginning, or our communication from the beginning, we are setting it for the failure. So what I found in my own relationship is that it is very helpful for me is the fact that I tried as much as possible to move from the place of my personal responsibility inside of my relationship. I'm not waiting for another side to improve it, but I'm looking inward inside of myself and my own responsibility. How can I improve it? How can I communicate better? How I can pass my thoughts in a more clear way so the other person receive it in a better way. And once I started working on improving how I communicate, a lot of issues in my life became more clear, and relationships itself, they begin to shift in very, very positive direction. For a very long time, I was trying to understand why is it so hard for us to communicate properly? Why is it so hard for us to hear another side, to be curious about their thoughts process, to don't take it personally? And with all of my studying and analyzing myself, I understood that we all have triggers, whatever it is, something from our past or maybe from some old wound, and that wound gets us touched in the present. So instead of responding from a calm, understanding place, we often react impulsively. And this impulsive reaction tends to make situation even worse. And what I have learned in my life is that if I can catch myself when I feel that reactive impulse, to pause, because that's when my ego is in charge instead of my higher self, and my higher self is always trying to lead me to the more grounded place, to the place of mutual understanding, while my ego is always trying to protect the picture of me that was created even long time before this situation in communication which I'm right now in. All of us, we come with the baggage. We come with a lot of experience in our life. We come with our own beliefs that came from our family, from our culture, from the environment we grow up in. We come with a lot of patterns from our past that directly influence how we communicate today. In my relationship, what I have noticed is that I was repeating the same communication mistakes without realizing it. But once I decided to be really honest with myself and to look into the way I communicate, I realized that there is a lot of things that I'm kind of doing wrong and I need to fix. So our past doesn't have to dictate our present, but we have to be capable to take responsibility and ownership and recognize these patterns in these present moments and to don't allow them to influence our relationship now. For example, I had noticed that I had certain habits when it comes to communication. I would sometimes interrupt conversation. I would get defensive, or I would withdraw myself when the things got tough, when the communication was challenging. These were all defensive mechanisms that I was carrying from my past. And when I realized I was doing them, when I moved from responsibility in my communication style in my relationship, it was a huge breakthrough for me. Because even I felt wounded in the moment to acknowledge, oh God, I'm doing these things. I'm making my communication in relationship difficult. At the same time, it helped me to understand that these actions weren't about the person I was communicating it with. They were about me and my insecurities. And from that place, I was able to move to more understanding towards my partner instead of blaming and accusing. And at the same time, it opened the door for the more empathy towards myself, where I gave myself permission to acknowledge that I didn't know how to communicate before, but I have chance now to learn to communicate better. And the biggest shift for me is when I learned how to truly listen, not just to respond and just to talk and just to move from the place, this is what is the problem for me, this is what I feel, this is what I want you to do, but really to understand what the other person is really saying, what is underneath those words. And communication isn't just about what is being said on the surface level. It's about what is being unsaid. Especially when we talk about communication between male and female, let's say in the marriage, the males, they don't have that capacity of communicating it very deep, very emotional, the way females does. And what I found that sixth sense of me, like a woman, it helped me a lot to understand my partner better, even in the places where he is not able to communicate fully what he is feeling. So when I started really listening in my relationship, listening what is underneath and giving the vocabulary inside of my relationship from the real place of understanding, curiosity, empathy, real need for connection, everything started to change. It opened open the doors for the whole new level of understanding and connection. And the more I listen to really understand, the more effectively I communicate. I often find that when I shift this mindset, the conversation itself becomes less about me defending myself and my point of view and more about us understanding each other in the moment. Most of the time when we are in conflict with our partner, their words are coming from the place of hurt and not hate. And if we approach our communication with empathy, we start to see behind their words. Whenever we get defensive or we take things personally, like their words mean something about us, we immediately shut down that empathy. And the conversation kind of moves from empathy to the place of seeking for control, for power struggle. The conversation moves in the spiral out of control, basically, when we're really trying to bring it to the place of understanding. The energy we bring into conversation, into communication, will always dictate the energy of communication itself. What I mean by this, whenever I'm able to move past of my own ego and my wounds and take responsibility for how I communicate, everything change. When I set the tone for communication in the way I approach communication from the beginning, the tone, the body language, the energy, it sets result of that communication. Communication cannot be about proving who is right and who is wrong. It has to be about connecting. It has to be about understanding and on the end resolving things together to find a solution. So when we take responsibility for how we communicate, we move from the place of pointing the finger and saying, you did this and you did this and it hurted me and this is why you are bad. We start moving into the empathy and we start saying, this is what I feel. This is how I feel. This is what your words makes me feel, which is making a huge difference in how we communicate. We don't blame, we are not defensive, but we are just stating the feelings we have in the moment. And that approach completely shifts the energy in the communication itself and on the end the result of communication. Apart from communicating with empathy, with understanding, with curiosity, with really intention to establish connection and understanding, it's also important to recognize when to talk and when to pause. And one of the things I had to learn was actually the timing. I used to try to address everything immediately when I was upset, when the emotions are on fire, and usually nothing productive came out of it. Whenever I give myself time to calm down, to wait until I can approach the conversation with clarity, the result of conversation itself, the outcome is way better. Because when we are emotional, we are not communicating from our best self. We are communicating from our fire, from our emotions. We are not able to see the things clearly. I will use example of the toddler. When our toddler has tantrum and it's, screaming on the street or throwing himself on the street in the shopping mall, whatever we try to communicate with the child in that moment, it just doesn't come into them because their front part of the brain, prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for the logical thinking, for critical thinking, is completely shut down and they don't hear us. And usually when the kid gets emotions out, when it cries a little bit, when mama hugs a little bit, they are able to understand what did they do and what did happen and why it happened. So I often tend to say that we adults are just like a big kids. The same things our kids are functioning, the same things we all function. When we are under huge emotions, when something triggered us, and usually it triggered us because of our past wounds, we are not able to see that that trigger that we're feeling in a moment is actually doesn't have nothing to do with the present moment. It has to do with something which was before. But when we recognize this and we give ourselves time to pause, to calm down, and then to choose appropriate timing to communicate, we are able to approach communication in way more clear way, in grounded way, and the solution of it, the end result of that communication is always better than when we communicate from impulsive place. Also, apart from timing for communication, I think it's very important to create a safe space for conversation. Not every place is for deep conversation, but we often, again, act very impulsively and we start communicating some very deep matters or important matters in the marriage or in relationship in the place and in the time where we shouldn't talk about it, just because we are not able to stay still, to stay in dignity and grace, and to wait for a right time and a right moment to address the issue. When we create a safe space to communicate, both partners are allowed, they have space for the real honest conversation. Finding the space for communication and timing, it needs and it requires a lot of patience. And what I do in my relationship to calm myself down, to don't react impulsively in the moment, to don't communicate wherever I think that I just want to get things out, is to go inside of myself and move from the place of curiosity. Why is this hurting me right now? What is beneath it? Why his words touch me so much? If somebody else told me that, would it hurt me the same way? What is going on inside of me? When I move the focus, the shift from or whatever he said, and I move it inward to myself to check why am I feeling the way I'm feeling, instantly I get to calm down. Once I calm down, once there is a space and time to communicate, I communicate from completely different place. I'm not coming from the place of you did this and you said this and defensive and finger pointing place, but from the place when you said this, I felt this. I think it's coming from this place. Let me try to understand your intention behind your words. Let's find solution together. And maybe there is something which is really not okay in the moment in relationship. But if we're coming from impulsive place, we are immediately setting our communication and our relationship for conflict. But when we go inward and give ourselves time to pause, to choose the right timing and place for communication, the outcome of it, it's usually way, way better. Asking questions like, what's going on? Instead of immediately jumping into the judgment, into defensiveness, will always open the door to connection. What's going on? Curiosity. Where you coming from? Why are you saying this? Instead of what you said, it means something about me. What you said, it's hurting me. So the point anymore is not about reaching the level of mutual understanding, but to point who is hurted more in that communication. And even if we are in the situation where the conversation isn't easy, it's challenging, there is really some huge matter that we need to communicate, the fact that the both parties in the communication are willing to listen creates a much more grounded and respectful dynamic. Now, a lot of females will say, I try to communicate nicely, I come from very nice place, I don't want to fight, I don't want to argue, but somehow the communication takes different direction, even with our best intention. And we have to remind ourselves over here that understanding boundaries and taking breaks when needed is required. We don't have to communicate everything in that moment. We have permission and power to set the boundaries in the way we are not able right now to communicate how I wish that we communicate properly with mutual understanding and empathy. So better we put this for later when we are able to really understand each other. Communication itself isn't about getting everything out at once. There are times when it's important to take the breaks, especially when emotions are running high, when we are on fire. And the thing is, we can always come back to step back and honor our own boundaries and our partner boundaries at the same time. And in these moments, it's really crucial for maintaining a healthy conversation. So often the goal shouldn't be, let's get everything out, let's communicate everything out, let's clear the air immediately, but instead assessing the situation itself and judging, is it necessary to put it for later, to set the boundaries, or we are able to communicate healthy and come to the resolution or solve the problem in the best interest of our relationship. Like I already mentioned, our responsibility in communication is extremely crucial, that we are honest to ourselves about the way we communicate, about the things we do, and to really start from that place of responsibility and leading ourselves to the better place of communication. Hand in hand with that comes practicing humility, admitting when we are wrong. I've had to learn to admit when I'm wrong. And it's sometimes very hard because our ego is very, very protective and it's trying to protect the picture of ourselves that we created. And to be able to apologize in the moment requires a lot of compassion for yourself and a lot of self-awareness. And on the end, kind of view on the bigger picture in the moment. Is it more important that I protect my ego in the moment, or is it more important that I establish connection with my partner? What is more important? Because in my opinion, in my life, whenever I had people who did something wrong, and they were able to own it and come to me and apologize, I was always respecting them more. I always built a deeper connection with them. But whichever connection with the people, I had situation where they were trying to blame me or to gaslight me in any way without taking ownership and responsibility for the cause, for the harm they made, we never established deeper connection. So my advice in this situation is always to try to look into the bigger picture of the situation and to kind of understand that if we are protecting our ego and what we think that how we should behave in the moment, we will never be able to create a real connection in the relationship. Also, sometimes I've noticed that my communication used to be incomplete. And we ladies tend to do this a lot. We expect that our partner read our mind. And owning that fact that I'm not explaining the things properly has really helped me to deepen my relationship, to choose the words as simple as possible to explain my thought process without assuming that another side knows what is beneath it. Humility in communication fosters trust. And from that trust, we build intimacy in our relationship. So if our goal is to communicate better, we first have to go from the place of our own responsibility to evoke more humility in the way we approach our relationship and our communication to be able to create more trust and build more intimacy. And the real beauty of communication lies in finding common ground. You know that when the people say we can agree to disagree, instead of trying to win the conversation, to prove our point, to prove who is right and who is wrong, we work together to find solution. My mother used to always tell me the marriage is like a small boat where the two people are sitting inside. And when the water is coming inside, if you say the water is coming from your side of the boat, you're gonna sink together. You have to work together to get that water out of the boat. And it's such a powerful metaphor that whenever I get myself in the tough patch in my relationship with the communication, I always try to remind myself that we are together in this boat. And it's not important who is taking water out more, me or him. It's important that we get the water out and we are in the safe, connected place together. Communication should always be a shared effort to move forward, not just a solo task of venting out our frustration. And even if we get in the situation where, like I said, from our best intention, we try to communicate how the best we can, but we don't get that from another side, which in my opinion is usually very rare, because if we approach it from the calm way, we don't attack, we don't defend, we don't point fingers, another side is more open to hear us. But if it happens that another side doesn't want to hear us, even with our best intention, we always can set boundaries and keep the cool. Keep the healthy way of communication. We don't have to get into the fight. And sooner or later, another side will see that we are not trying to pick up the fight. We are really trying to communicate in a calm way. And over the time, again, with the patience, will approach and will be able to communicate in more respectful and more healthy way than impulsive way. And lastly, when we let go of our unrealistic expectation about how others should communicate with us, we allow the space for more genuine conversation and understanding. We never can control how others respond to us, but we can control how we show up. I will communicate with the best intention, but I'm not responsible for your reaction. I will come from the genuine place of trying to understand you, trying to open up to you, but how you gonna react on what I'm trying to say is your responsibility, not mine. And this is very, very important, not just in relationship and communication, in any communication in our life. We always can just control how we coming, how we approaching the situation, what is our intention and action in the moment, but how others receive it is not our piece of responsibility. And by letting go of expectations, how others should communicate to us, we free ourselves from disappointment. And on the end, we allow others to communicate with us in their own way. And when we move from the place of personal responsibility in communication, when we set our standards so high in the way we communicate with the people, with respect, with humility, with trying to understand another person without blame, without pointing the fingers, without being defensive, with real curiosity to find solution, people approach us in a different way. They feel that the way we communicate with them doesn't give them space to communicate badly with us. It sets the tone and energy of the communication itself and the way how the people deal with us on the end. Also, in relationship, we often seek for validation from our partners. I feel hurted, I feel what I feel, and if you don't recognize what I feel, then you are bad, you are villain. Only if you show me complete validation for what I'm feeling, especially in the way how I communicating it, then you understand me. Otherwise, you are not trying to understand me. Whenever we are seeking validation from our partner, rather than being secure in our own worth, we kind of stop listening and start expecting. I expect you to heal my wounds. I expect you to say the words which will make me feel better. And this completely stops us from engaging in healthy communication because we are not approaching conversation from a place of understanding, but from the place of need. I need you to fix this inside of me. And if you don't do that, then you are bad. Then we have conflict. Then you don't understand me. But if we approach communication with genuine curiosity about our partner's experience without making it about us, without making it about validation of our own emotions and experience and expectations, we open the door for a deeper connection. When we point need for validation just towards ourselves inward, then that validation is just helping us to feel better. But validation shouldn't be just about us. It should be about being heard both sides. It's about understanding and meeting each other where we are without conditioning. If you don't make me feel better, then I don't communicate with you anymore. You don't understand me. You are bad. You never hear me. If another person doesn't validate us, it doesn't hear us in the way we would like to be heard. But when we know our worth, when we are aware of ourselves and the way we communicate, we don't seek validation from other people, but we create the space for mutual validation, where both sides, both opinions are appreciated and accepted. So I hope that this podcast episode will help you to communicate better, will open some new portals in your head, some new understanding of maybe how you sabotage your communication in relationship, how you can improve it. I would really love you to communicate with me through email or on Instagram. We can open this topic more. You can share your insights with me or some obstacles that you faced or maybe the ways you've overcome them in your own relationship. But on the end, I think it's very crucial that we move from the personal responsibility, personal power, and from the place of really trying to establish connection inside of our relationship instead of making everything about ourselves only. That's it for this Sunday episode. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, I would really appreciate if you would share this podcast episode with the people who mean something to you or who could have value from this podcast episode. Until the next Sunday, thank you for listening. Thank you for dedicating your time to this podcast, and stay safe, trust yourself, and see you next Sunday. Bye.